So today we have with us Tim Conroy, poet, special education teacher, and younger brother of Pat Conroy. And just so you all know, Tim's most recent book is No True Route. I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who's going to find out what Bernie's thinking about today.
So really what we wanted to talk about in this episode is how Bernie met Pat and how in the world they became friends. And what did they have in common? This just Catholic boy, this Jewish kid, this military brat, this kid that had never seen anything. How'd y'all meet? And what'd you have in common? And what drew each other? What drew you to Pat?
uh, his emotion. Yeah, now should I look at the camera or Tim?
What's up?
Should I look at the camera or at Tim?
Look at the camera.
Okay. All right. Uh, his emotion, Tim. Um, we were both anxious. We were both hysterical kids. We both were very fun loving. The only thing we had in common with any of the kids we were growing up with is sports. And you remember back then in Beaufort in the 50s, 60s, you were talking about baseball, football, basketball, and Jesus. And that dominated the entire culture. If you were Jewish, you were well liked, well respected. As Daddy said, thank God for the black people. Uh, if it hadn't been for them, it'd be us. Catholics, nobody even knew what the hell Catholics were. Okay, there were only a few of them in town. There were 50 Jewish families because we're between Charleston and Savannah, South Carolina, which is two of the oldest synagogues in America. So uh, basically, it was basketball because Pat recognized my great jump shot. And what happened, this is the truth. Truth is we were having a pickup game. I think I was a junior, Pat was a sophomore, and we were having a big pickup game after school in the gym. It was one of those games where there's 1,000 freaking people out there playing. Okay. Uh, and of course, there's Pat. Well, Pat was such a great athlete that he immediately took control of our team of about 20 people. All right. And I didn't even hardly know who he was. All right. And suddenly I'm in the midst of all these people and I'm thinking, shit, there are too many people out there. I'll never get my jump shot off. It's great. Hell, I was ready to walk off the court. And so I kind of move a bit toward the basket. Okay. A place I'm not real comfortable with in a crowd, since I'm a short, skinny kid and cowardly. And and suddenly I find the ball weaving in and out all over the place. I find it in the palm of my hands. And I don't even know how it got there. And all I have to do is go like this for a layup, and I make it. And I look through all the kids and I see it's Pat that's throwing the ball. So afterwards, Pat comes up to me and he says, "You got a really good jump shot, Bernie." Well, he knew who I was through two girls. One was Gretchen Moss and the other was Kathy Kennedy, both Catholics, I think. And they lived at the military housing at Laurel Bay with Pat and his family at the time. And he said the key words. This is how Pat is such a phony and so flattering and so much fun and so loving and so full of shit. Okay. And he says, Gretchen and Kathy talk about you all the time. Gretchen and Kathy? Well, we're in study hall together, where I was actually trying to cheat my way through high school and therefore teach others to cheat, who were in my study hall with me so I could copy their papers, so I could get out of high school. Mom's all over my ass about my grades. Pat, you would never have anybody all over Pat's ass about his grades because Pat gave the impression that he was intelligent. Okay, he all but wore a coat and tie to school, glasses with no lenses in them. Okay, walked around like he was a member of the National Honor Society, and he was almost as dumb as me. He almost graduated with the same C average that I did. Okay, you'd never know it because of his writing and because of his participation in student councils and this kind of thing, which I didn't give a crap about. Uh, um, and so they knew me from study hall. And he said, God, I said, what'd they say? You know, Catherine and Gretchen. I mean, they were pretty, y'all. They were really pretty girls and smart, you know. I cheated off their papers. They were very supportive. And um, and so what Pat said, they said, Bernie is so cute and so funny. Now, that meant so much to me that I remember it pathetically to this day. All right. And of course,
you lie.
of course, I believed him. And of course, as Tim is now saying, as you're saying now, Tim, if that was true, how come I didn't get a date with anyone? With either one? I couldn't get a date with either one of them. So Pat was lying. All right. Now, he told the bigger truth. We all had fun together. We liked each other a lot. But basically, that's how we met. And Pat, like me, Pat could not do what the other Southern boys down here did. If you went through, if you went through Tim the neighborhoods on Saturday afternoon, you got to see these men, athletic looking, Gentile with their teenage sons who were blonde and blue-eyed and athletic and so forth. And they would have their heads under the hood of their cars in their driveways, every damn one of them. Okay. Like they were researching the Talmud and commenting on it, only it was the insides of a freaking automobile. Okay. And you would pass them. Well, Jews in town couldn't do that. Okay. Jews in town were culturally unrelated to the immigrant experience, to that kind of practical mechanical stuff. Daddy, to have somebody come over and change the light bulb. One time he had somebody over here changing the light bulb on a ladder. And then Daddy scoots us all out of the house and we wait in the front yard so the house, in case the house blows up.
That's
Okay.
right.
In other words, we were that impractical. Pat was the only one that wasn't a man like me. He was like a woman who was athletic and funny and smartass like me. Okay.
So when did you find out that he had an abusive father? When did that happen?
That's a great question. I didn't believe it at all.
Yeah.
In other words, he would talk about his father being an asshole and a shithead, um, and Pat. Remember, Pat was filled with rage and hate, but he could outlove anybody. He was filled with what he would call phony as hell, great love to everybody in the goddamn world. All right. Which drove me crazy. Pat, who? Who is this object of this great love? Okay. Is it me? Definitely not. Okay. So on and so forth. So I don't know
Yeah. So when did you find out?
Right. I was
when
reading.
did you believe it? When did you believe it?
I believed it in 19. I believe it was when Santini came out. And when he was writing Santini, I would read all of Pat's stuff. And I will tell you, I was a passionate Southern Jewish boy, but very Southern too. And I went crazy over his writing. Everything he wrote, everything I loved. Okay. I wasn't an academic like some people were around here who were at the college and so forth. He wasn't too emotional for me. He could have gone, he was a towering inferno when he wrote a lot of the time, as he would call it. And I loved his rage. I loved his anger, his passion, and his humor, and how much he cared about things. And so he would show me, I would read everything Pat wrote. And it was a character in his books in one way or another. Uh, which I thought really added to the quality of those books. That's a joke. And so what happened is he would bring over different chapters of the Great Santini. He'd bring a quart of bourbon with him, okay, George Dickel or whatever it was, and we'd sit and have a drink, and he would either show me the chapters and I'd read them and go through them, and he'd leave them with me, or he would read me excerpts, and Martha, my wife, we'd sit on the bed, he'd read the excerpts to us. And then he would go back, and if he needed to do something that he thought he should do, he would do it. And yeah, so I'm reading a draft of the Great Santini. And the part here, this is where I learned it. Now remember too, I have to tell you as an adjacent part of the story, that the kids in my classroom at the progressive school that I worked at, Pat had his kids at, Pat was involved in, help found, I could tell, no, there were 3 or 4 every year who would be bright as hell, charming as hell, like Pat, fun, easy to be with, make great grades, except Pat didn't do that. But they didn't have to pretend.
So this was a characteristic of kids that had been abused. Is that what you're saying?
Because they would be, yes, because inside there was an empty, hollow part when they would do their stories, when they would write their stories. And Pat loved the kids' stories in the room. He'd hang around listening to them because they were personal, like his writing was. And, you know, sibling rivalry, violence, death of a dog, whatever. Yeah, all the things adults write about. The history of the world was in those kids.
Well, you know, Bernie writes in his memoir, Pat Conroy, Our Lifelong Friendship. He advises Pat, let the child speak.
Yes.
And it's one of those moments when I read that, you know, I took it in as how why do people bury their rage? Why do they or pretend they don't have it? Why? And you were trying to tell him to dig for the truth, to get beyond great love into maybe the great rage a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I had found out, and my wife Martha had found out through teaching the kids and through our own writing, is that there is a little boy inside you. And I used to scoff at that notion because it was so fashionable. But the kids showed me there was. There is a period where when you are innocent, say before when the older child is born and you see sibling rivalry, which is old as Cain and Abel, or one of your parents is abusive, or there's a divorce and it bothers you, or any of the romance, the first kiss would be like the sexual intercourse for an adult or an older person. Unrequited love, that was always a big one. And every single theme in history that you can think of for adults that they have to write about, and which I later realized included Pat, was the history of the whole world in each child. Every one of them had suffered all of those themes: romantic, failing to be adequate, not being up to snuff, feeling rejection. All those things they had suffered by the time they were 5 or 6 years old. So if you go back and you find the child who before that who was innocent, it makes it safe for them to then go into, and when my little brother was born, all they could do was burp, fart, and cry, and took all the, my mother was reading him stories instead of me. And, you know, I don't get the attention. And that affects the whole family. It affects them for a long time. It affects the relationship with certainly the father, often the mother. And so I realized we all have these little people inside of us that are dying to come out, that are dying to tell us their story. And here I was until I discovered that something was missing. What Pat added to it was this: those kids that I just described who were charming and personable, made good grades, easy to get along with. So did Pat. Pat was fun loving. So were they. They were loving. I didn't know it was because they were needy, like Pat was, like we all are to some degree, but if you've been abused, all right. And so I was uncomfortable because I knew in some way or another I was failing those 3 or 4 kids every year. I just didn't know how because everything else came too damn easy to them. All right. And there was a sadness I could feel. Okay. And uh if you touched them, you could feel something tangible. And uh um and so what happened is when I read Pat's that chapter of the Great Santini, this is the one where, and Tim, you can help me with this. I know you'll remember it. But basically, what happened is Pat is Ben Meacham. His daddy is Colonel Meacham.
Yeah.
His mother's Lillian. They're in an old house on the point in Beaufort, and you could get them at a bargain back then, antebellum houses, back in 60s, 50s. And Colonel Meacham has just basically beat up Pat's mother, has abused while he's doing it other kids of the family, especially Pat, because Pat's trying, as he always did, to pull him off of his mother. He's drunk and he realizes he's done something. He leaves the house. He goes onto what's called the point, where kids play baseball and stuff on the green, and a few blocks down from the house. And uh, and his mother says, Ben, go find your father. You have to bring him home. He's drunk. Okay. So Ben goes out onto the green and he finds his father. Okay. And his father is drunk. He's weaving and he's passed out basically. And a big oak tree there. And he's passed out, and Ben looks at him, and all he can feel is rage. Pat could see so much in people because he could love them and hate them at the same time. And so you see more of them than most of us would. And it made him perceptive and also wary. But so he's straddling him, and all he can think about is pummeling his face into 1,000 pieces of meat and slobber and saliva and whatever. Instead, he picks him up. He puts his arm around his shoulder. He helps him up. Don is drunk, and he says, I love you, Dad.
I love you, Dad.
I love you, Dad. Then Don can't, excuse me, Colonel Meacham can't take it. So he tries to run away from him. He's like weaving his way through tacklers. He's drunk. And Pat then realizes the key. He says, oh, I love you, Dad. Oh, Dad, I love you. Oh, gosh, I love you, Dad. You're so good. There's all this stuff until finally he gets Don home, his dad home, and takes him back into the house. And that scene is over.
And the scene, just so people know, that scene is very close to reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things in the Great Santini that Pat had to fight for, the editor wanted to cut this out because he just
But not this one.
No, not that scene. This is the scene I want to read. Just a short thing and get your reaction.
And let me ask you this: it's the real one, the one I saw through a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
This is a no, this is a different. I'm not reading what you just told, but this is sort of at the end of the book how he ends the book, very close to the ending.
Oh yeah.
Can a boy begin a prayer with the hatred of his father in his heart? Can that boy walk up to the altar of God, and can he lay that hatred out? Can he spew his hate and tell his story? Can he tell about beatings and humiliations? Can he tell of the Marine who stormed the beaches of his childhood? Can he look into the eye of God and spit into that purest source of light for engendering his soul in the seed of a father who did not know the secret of tenderness, a father who loved in strange and undecipherable ways, a father who did not know how to love, a father who did not know how to try. And so it was unbelievable. To me, it's an unbelievable paragraph that kind of goes with what you're saying.
Absolutely. So yes, that's right.
Yep.
So you are.
Yep.
So what happens is I'm reading this scene and I'm thinking, good God, love is a weapon. Love is a whatever it is. This is fucking incredible. But in that draft, that was handwritten. The part that I'm describing, was handwritten over stuff that was crossed out. Well, as a teacher, that's all you're interested in.
Yeah.
You're interested in what's not said. You're interested in what's between the lines, below the lines, what's not there. There's always more. Pat would tell you that. Okay.
And that's the genius of you as a teacher to recognize that.
I agree with that too.
Yes.
I agree with Tim there. Absolutely. And my wife taught me that. It's in a different podcast. You'll see it. What was that one? My favorite advice from my favorite teacher: shut up first. and but anyway, um, uh, what happened was, so I get a magnifying glass. And Martha helps me get one. I don't even know what one is. All right. And I get one and I'm looking through, and here's what I find he had written in the original draft. There's nothing about love in there. Nothing. He finds his daddy. His daddy is on the green, Colonel Mitchell. And he's passed out under that oak, just like Pat began it. But instead of this, I love you and helping him up, he let me, if you got that scene there right there, I think he beats the shit out of
Yeah,
him.
that's what happened.
Okay,
Yeah,
he beats the living hell out of him. And I can remember even some of the descriptive details that were incredible. It was horrifying. I mean, he pummels his face, his eyes, his nose into just a horror. It's a horror show. He just pummels his face. Okay. And afterwards, his dad's there. He's moaning, he's groaning, what have you, bleeding and bruised. And Pat picks him up, puts his arm around him, holds him up, and takes him back to the house. That, Tim, is the answer to your question. When I realized what he had crossed out and what he originally put in that scene, I thought, holy shit, he's been telling the truth all this time.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to is that moment where you believed him.
Absolutely, totally.
And so, how you know this story better than anybody because you sort of talked through me through this about the effect of the Great Santini, that publication, that book, and later the movie, that effect it had on my father because you witnessed it.
Yes. Let me add something to that initially first, real quick. My first reaction and my wife's first reaction, when we saw what was crossed out, and this is very important to me in our relationship with Pat, leave it in. I told Pat, no, leave it in. Take out, put what you've crossed out and take it out. And Pat said, nobody will believe me, Bernie. You didn't believe me. You think you're going to believe it now. My editor at Houghton Mifflin, she won't believe it. Nobody's going to believe it. And why would they? We thought back then that abuse and molestation, all that kind of thing, was something that happened. Some stranger leapt out of the brush and molested you or beat you up, or criminals. We had no idea. We had no idea that, hell, I was upset with my family and daddy and mom because they weren't like Ozzie and Harriet. And I would say to them, why can't you be more like Ozzie and Harriet and be nice to us kids, like they are? And my mother would say, well, maybe, Bernard, if you and your brothers acted a little bit more like Ricky and David, then we could be more like Ozzie and Harry. This is where I was coming from. That's where most people are coming from in one way or another. And 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 so, you know, it, this was brand new. And so I related it to the kids in my classroom. Pat came to the kids in the classroom. God, what a teacher he could be. I mean, he wasn't teaching like he was taught then. He was teaching like he learned. And he listened to those kids so attentively. Their stories came out. They were sheets of flame. They were incredible. And Pat was the reason. And they loved him. He loved them. Anyway, I forgot the question.
Well, no, I wanted to get to, and you almost there, but what, in terms of the metaphor or in terms of whatever you think you could describe the effect it had on Dad. Pat as teacher, Pat as
Absolutely.
poet,
Thank you.
Pat as child, what did that have on the
I
effect on
think
Dad?
Don, at the time, his dad, that's a great question too, was the loneliest man I think I can ever remember seeing. Peg, his wife, had divorced him. He adored Peg. He adored Peg after the divorce. He was totally in love. She was tired of it. She wasn't going to put up with any more of his bullshit. And she was having problems herself back then. And uh, and so Don showed up at Pat's door. Now, all he had heard since Santini was out, Santini was out by then. So Don was this famous horror show Dracula figure of a man. Everywhere he went, oh, that's the Great Santini. Okay, be careful. All right, he'll kill you. so, so, so he shows up at Pat's door, and I think he weeps for the first time in Pat's life. He saw his daddy crying, and here's the beauty of Pat is he could hold a grudge like somebody you've never seen. I mean, he held one against me for 15 fucking years. Okay.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. Yeah. And as his whole family says, right? And Pat is so touched by human emotion, by tragedy. It made him a great writer. And he invites his dad in. They sit down and talk. And they go and they sit down at Manuel's Tavern in Atlanta, where people would go drink and talk and so forth, get hot dogs. And he says, Dad, and he's listening. And when Pat is really listening, nobody's more intense. Okay. And he's really listening. He wants to hear what his dad has to say. And his dad says, I should have beat y'all more. I should beat y'all harder. And you've written this book, and Pat says, if you'd beat me anymore, Dad, I'd be frigging Hemingway. Okay. All right. And they get to talking, and his dad becomes very loving. And they go on tour together. They're a scream. It is very loving. Pat will announce his dad, and he will say his IQ is
The room temperature. It's
yeah,
the IQ.
do that for me.
The IQ is room temperature, and Dad would come up to the microphone and say, "It's damn hot in here. It must be 150 degrees."
So his dad, remember, he was not just a bad man, he was a war hero. He saved people's lives. Okay. And so his dad turned out to be in peacetime, instead of a terrorist, since there was no war to fight, very, very loving, very kind. We play basketball together. And yeah, go ahead.
So Bernie was the first person that used the term Santini's hero.
He became Pat. Pat became, without question, Santini's hero. In fact, the title of the book right now, it's Pat Conroy, Our Lifelong Relationship. Give it a plug. The original title was Santini's Hero.
And
So
so, as Bernie and I are going to do several of these in the future, and we'll continue the conversation. But I hope y'all got something out of it today. And Bernie is what I've always um, take from him is that moment in the advice, the writing advice he gave to Pat, and I think is good for all writers. Let the child speak.
Leave it in.
Yeah, leave it in.